As promised, joining us, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, good to visit with you again. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Let me ask, and this before we get to serious matters, and there are plenty of them, how would you describe your time in the Senate at this point? Has it been fun?
I think there are parts about it that are very rewarding, especially the constituent service aspects of it, where people come in with issues and we're able to help them. I think legislatively, nothing's happening because Harry Reid has basically shut down the Senate. I mean, he's perhaps, well, I would say probably the worst majority leader in modern American history, perhaps the most dictatorial as well. I mean, he literally does not allow anything to move forward, doesn't allow people to get votes on ideas. I mean, we're stuck right now trying to move an accountability bill on veterans, which has, 11 Democrat co-sponsors, 160 Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi, voted for it in the House. We can't even get a vote on it in the Senate.
And what reason is the majority leader giving?
I think the primary reason is he wants to protect the president and he wants to protect his incumbents for re-election. He doesn't want his members having to making difficult decisions or taking difficult votes. And so he just doesn't allow issues to come to the floor or allow amendments to be voted on. It's all about elections. It's all about politics for him.
Let's talk about that VA reform bill, Senator Rubio. What are the key components in it that would make a meaningful difference and change in the embarrassment that is the operation of the VA in many parts of the country right now?
Well, the VA, along with many other agencies of government, have a cultural problem, and that problem is a culture of lack of accountability. No one thinks they can be fired. They've seen time and again that incompetent people and those who don't want to work get paid the same as those who work really hard. And as a result, you have a lack of total accountability. Now, let me preface that by saying that the vast majority of people that work at the VA work very hard, try very hard, and do a good job. There is a handful of people that do not. And as a result, it's created this serious problem. Our bill is very straightforward. There's nothing complicated about it. What it says is that the secretary of the VA can fire executives who aren't doing their jobs. Right now, they really can't fire them. And in fact, if you look at the figures from over the last few years, a senior executive at the VA who isn't doing a good job is likelier to get a bonus or a promotion than they are to be fired. Because so it's very simple. We just give the secretary the power to fire mid-level executives who are not doing their job.
Senator Marco Rubio with me this morning on the morning show. Senator, but as you said, that is a cultural problem in government. You say bonuses for poor work, and I think of the IRS as well. And it doesn't stop there, does it?
No, look, I think throughout government, because of civil service status that a lot of employees have, there's a total lack of accountability. You can't fire someone. You don't even try. You just kind of give up. And let me tell you who it's really demoralizing for. It's the worker that is working hard.
Absolutely.
The person that is trying to do a good job. And I think in many instances, the vast majority of people that serve us in government, working at any one of these agencies, are well-intentioned. They work hard. They do a good job. But if you have just a handful that aren't, it begins to spread through the organization. It begins to demoralize those who are working hard. And it has dramatic impacts, as we're seeing with the Veterans Administration.
Joining us, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, while we're on the subject of the VA, it is inescapable to talk about what has just happened in recent days with Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. It is abundantly clear, even those that in the media routinely defend the president, he has broken the law. He has broken the law. You have Senator Dianne Feinstein coming out saying as much. What, though, I mean, we've seen this pattern repeatedly, and I'm going to ask the question that everybody wants me to ask you and every other member of Congress. What are we going to do about it?
That's a recurring question we get everywhere, and I think hopefully this is the beginning of accountability by the Congress over this president, because right now one of the reasons we can't do that is because the Democrats control the Senate. And I think even they now have to be deeply uncomfortable with what he has done with regards to this situation. You said it was an illegal act. It absolutely was. He violated and ignored the law. He's made it up. And unfortunately, this is one that's not reversible. This is not something you can go to court and win, because they're not going to send back the 5 members of the Taliban. And, of course, we're not going to send this American serviceman back to Afghanistan. So I think the problem that we now fundamentally face with regards to this issue is in addition to the fact that he has violated the law, you have now released 5 very dangerous people back onto the battlefield. We expect them, I fully anticipate them to rejoin the fight against America very quickly, very soon, and quite frankly, very effectively. And you've now set a precedent. You've now told our enemies all over the world that they should try to get their hands on an American serviceman or woman because you can get 5 prisoners freed.
Is there any doubt in your mind, because there isn't in mine, that the timing of this release had nothing to do with this man's health, but had everything to do with the VA story that was in the news?
Well, we're learning more every day about it, but I am increasingly convinced that it had absolutely nothing to do with his immediate health. I think it had everything to do with a political ploy that they had last week. You look at last week, none of this is a coincidence. So he visits the troops on Monday, Memorial Day in Afghanistan. Nothing wrong with that. That's a proper thing for him to do. Then he comes back and gives his "the war is over" speech in West Point. And then he tops it off with this prisoner swap. And I think what he was anticipating was a messaging arc, right? A week of arguing that this is the president that has a clear foreign policy. He's bringing the war to Afghanistan to an end. He got the last man out. He was expecting cheers for all of this. I think he miscalculated on the last point because he didn't take into account that he was violating the law. Had he consulted with members of Congress, they would have told him, we're not going to cheer this. You're going to be releasing 5 of the most dangerous individuals. I mean, these aren't 5 electricians, right? These aren't 5 people that did the plumbing at the Taliban headquarters. These are dangerous killers that have now been released and will rejoin the fight against the U.S., and they've been welcomed back like heroes. And we're counting on a foreign government to monitor them for a short period of time, and then after that, they're on their own.
Joining us, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio here on 100.7 FM WFLA. You mentioned the president's foreign policy. This just, in my opinion, the latest blunder. It has been a disaster, Senator, and we are weakened as a nation. We're weakened against the superpowers that rival us in some regards, but we're weakened in general just everywhere we turn, and it cannot possibly bode well for our future.
No, look, the president has dedicated his time to fighting strawmen in this debate over foreign policy. He goes around saying the days of invading other countries are over. I don't know anyone who's proposing an invasion of another country. I haven't heard anyone. I certainly haven't asked for us to invade another country. That's a false argument. That's a straw man that he sets up and then beats down to argue that's what his opponents are saying. All we want is a strategic foreign policy. What is America's role in the world in the 21st century? And the role of America in the 21st century has to build upon what we did in the 20th century. We need to lead the free countries of the world through our example and through our actions. That doesn't mean we go to war. That doesn't mean we get involved in every conflict on the planet. But it means a clear leadership and a clear direction that our allies around the world want from us. In the absence of that, and what we have instead is a president has decided that the best way to make the world safe is for us to retreat from the global stage, for us to stop getting involved, even in speaking out against things, because that somehow will invite our enemies or our opponents to like us more. Well, that has miserably failed. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, all of these groups continue to do what they need to do, and they view that as a sign of weakness, and it invites them to do more of it.
Hey, Senator, it is right now we're now gearing up the 2014 midterm elections. There are little primaries here and there. Everyone has quickly discounted the strength of the Tea Party, i.e. Americans that believe that we need to return to very conservative basic principles in our country. It's still flexing its muscle. Is that right now the biggest thing we have to look forward to is the 2014 midterm elections?
It is, absolutely, because I think what's at stake here is the leadership of the United States Senate. Imagine for a moment if the United States Senate were not in the hands of Democrats any longer. In addition to stopping the appointment of terrible judges, in addition to stopping the appointment of horrifying agency heads that are doing dramatic damage to the country and the EPA and the Labor Department, you name it, in addition to all of this, we could actually begin to pass some things that make common sense and that the American public support. For example, an alternative to Obamacare. We could pass the Keystone Pipeline. We can pass a budget that begins to put America on solid footing moving forward. We can re-examine our tax code to once again make America the best place in the world to invest and to innovate. And these are things that the president will then have to decide whether he signs or vetoes, but they're going to be overwhelmingly popular among the American people. And at a minimum, it begins to help our country now, and in addition, it begins to lay down the framework for what it means to be a limited government conservative in the 21st century. So this election is critical, and that's why I've gotten involved in other races around the country. There's no Senate race in Florida this year because I desperately want to end Harry Reid's time as majority leader.
When you talk about important policy initiatives, I look at the GOP right now, Senator, and I have grave concerns because I look at an issue like the IRS. That is an issue that cuts across party lines. I think most average Americans out there think that the IRS is cumbersome, it is inordinately burdensome, and needs dramatic refinement, if not complete disbandment. What is the Republican Party doing to fine tune its messaging so that they can start winning the battle and advancing ideas instead of just backing off and talking about fixing Obamacare?
Yeah, well, first I think that the key for us is we need to stop being simply the opposition and we have to start being an alternative. I think there's work happening on that. The conservatism has always been about reform. And it's never been about protecting the status quo. Liberalism is about protecting the status quo. What liberals want to do is they want to take all of our existing government programs, all of our existing bureaucracies, agencies, laws, rules, and regulations, and they want to either expand them or protect them. What conservatism is about is we must always apply our principles of limited government and free enterprise to the modern issues of our time. The world has changed dramatically. We have more competition for talent and investment and innovation than ever before. We need to have a tax code that allows us to be globally competitive. We have to have a regulatory code that makes us globally competitive. We have to have an educational system that gives people the skills they need for the better careers of the 21st century. The existing systems we have in place right now that were designed in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, they didn't even work well in the last century. They are disastrous in this one. The choice between Democrats and Republicans is very simple. The Democrats want to keep protecting those outdated institutions, laws, and ideas. And we want to put in place reforms that bring us into the 21st century and reclaim the American dream. And I think we've got to do a better job of making that argument to more people.
Senator, let me ask, because if I don't ask, I'll be run up a flagpole. What about you? Are your intentions to consider, are you considering a run for the White House in 2016?
Well, I have to make the fundamental decision I need to make going into 2016 is, do I want to continue in public service? Do I want to continue in elected office? And if I do, then I'm going to have to choose between running for the United States Senate because I want to get more done here, or running for a bigger office like the presidency. So I'm still working through the first fundamental question, which is, I believe, a question that everyone in public service should always ask themselves: are you still in this for the right reasons? And then assuming that you are and that you answer that question in the affirmative, then the next question is, where can you best serve the country? And that's a decision that I'll need to make. I certainly haven't made one yet, and I'm thinking about it. I enjoy serving Florida in the Senate as well, so I'll let you know. We're getting, I guess, closer each day to having to make a decision in that regard.
Senator, last question, just real quickly. Give me a record for the Miami Dolphins next season. You know we got to talk NFL for at least one question.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't want to, I'm gonna reach here and say 10-6, but I don't actually even get some of the playoffs the way the AFC's panning out.
Okay, Senator, be well. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.